In today's episode, I'll talk about two very interesting stories. In the first story, I'll talk about the office real estate market in India and why it is very exciting at this point in time. And in the second story of the day, I'll talk about how HUL is fundamentally shifting its supply chain operations by almost entirely eliminating distributors. Welcome to the Daily Brief Show by Zerodha, where our aim is to cut through the noise and simplify the biggest news and stories in the financial markets in a way that is easy to understand, yet one level deeper as compared to your traditional news channels. I'm your host Anurag Bansal, and today is Friday, the 3rd of January. Let's get into the first story and talk about the office real estate market in India. Now look, this market in India is currently experiencing a big shift. Co-working spaces, which once used to be seen as a very small niche for startups and freelancers, are now grabbing the spotlight in a massive way. Now, there's also growing talk of a wave of IPOs on the horizon. It is driven by co-working companies that are very confident that their flexible and modern approach is here to stay for a long time. Now, global investors have also been putting a lot of money into this sector. They are betting that Indian businesses will continue to provide value and flexibility over long-term commitments. But to understand this buzz a little better, let's talk about India's commercial real estate landscape in general. See, CRE or commercial real estate refers to buildings and offices which are meant for businesses rather than for housing purposes. Now, India's big cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, NCR, Chennai and Hyderabad collectively offer around 650 to 700 million square feet of office space. Now, this office space usually falls under two broad categories. The first category is Grade A offices, which are the best and the most premium buildings, which are usually in great locations and are equipped with top-notch facilities. The other category is Grade B offices. Now, these are decent but slightly less fancy in areas and construction and amenities. Now, what's interesting is that a lot more office spaces are opening up in India right now. Somewhere around 45 to 60 million square feet will be added in just the next few years in India. Now, one big reason for this expansion is that India has become a global hub for industries like information technology as well as BFSI. And the startup ecosystem is also booming in India with new companies needing office space that they can grow into. On top of that, major foreign investors including well-known firms like Blackstone and Brookfield have been putting a lot of money into commercial properties in India. So overall, experts estimate that India's commercial real estate sector is worth around 45 to 50 billion US dollars, and it is growing at a rate of 8 to 10% every single year. Now, within this larger office market, co-working spaces have seen a big rise here. Now, back in 2015, co-working in India was a very small idea and mostly catered to small teams and freelancers. But in the years since then, co-working operators have been leasing millions and millions of square feet of office space every single year. They have gone from making up just a tiny percentage of the total office leasing to as much as 12 to 15% in some periods. And what's interesting is that this sudden jump has been driven by both startups as well as established companies. And that is because they like this flexibility and the easier cost structure which co-working spaces offer. Also, just by the way, in case you're new to the word co-working, let me give you a very quick explainer of what exactly it means. See, these are essentially shared office spaces that multiple individuals or businesses can use. You'll often find people sitting together from different organizations here, and that can lead to good networking opportunities. Now, these spaces are usually equipped with common amenities like desks, meeting rooms, and even snacks, which you don't have to set up or manage on your own. Operators like WeWork, Office, CoWorks, 91 Springboard, etc. have been at the forefront, and they are rapidly opening new centers in multiple cities across India. Now, these companies attract not just growing startups, but now also big multinational firms who want flexible workspace arrangements like I just mentioned earlier. Now, this makes sense in a world that has become comfortable with hybrid work environments because some people work from home while others come to office only for a small part of the week. Also, another reason why co-working has become so popular today is that companies, especially new companies, do not want to be locked into traditional leases that can last decades or even more. A co-working arrangement usually allows you to pay rent in months or in years, and you can scale up when your team grows, or you can downsize if you want to tighten your budgets. Also, hybrid work culture ever since the pandemic has also made people want flexible spaces that are closer to where they live rather than commuting to far off office buildings. And all of this fits superbly well for the co-working co-working model. Large corporations have started adopting what is called the hub and spoke strategy. Now, this hub, which is at the center, is their main headquarters, which is usually in a prime city location. And the spokes are offices or smaller setups in other areas so employees do not have to travel too far every single day. Co-working providers also make it straightforward to open satellite offices without the hassle of signing multiple long-term leases or investing in furniture and facilities. In addition to this, multinational companies that come to India to set up their own tech and operation hubs, sometimes referred to as global captive centers or GCCs, are also using flexible real estate solutions here. Instead of building an office from scratch, they are partnering with co-working operators to launch very quickly and then adjust based on how large their teams become over time. Also, these co-working operators have quite a few ways to earn their revenue. Some sign a long-term lease on a property, fully furnish it, and then charge memberships from different clients. Now, this brings in higher potential profits if the space starts to stay busy, but on the flip side, it also means that the operator has to keep paying rent even if the occupancy starts to dip. Now, some other co-working spaces also use a revenue sharing approach with the landlord, and this lowers their risk because they aren't stuck with a fixed rent bill every time. There are also franchise models where smaller investors or local businesses run a co-working center under a larger brand's name. And on top of that, many co-working spaces offer options to drop in daily or even by the hour, which can bring in more people but also can be harder to predict on the other hand. So overall, the co-working segment has quickly moved from a fringe concept to a mainstream part of India's commercial office sector. It's not just freelancers or tiny startups anymore. Like I said, major banks, consulting firms, tech companies, etc. are also signing up. So with the amount of investment that is flowing in here and with the companies continuing to prefer flexible arrangements over hefty long-term commitments, it does seem like this trend is here to stay. Also, upcoming public offerings by co-working players do hint that we might see more transformation in how office spaces in India are built and used, which makes co-working a very exciting area to watch in the broader commercial real estate story. Let's now move on to the next story and talk about a big shift that is happening in India's FMCG space. Hindustan Unilever Limited, or HUL, which is India's largest FMCG company, is introducing an entirely new way of delivering its products directly to retail shops. Now, this is called the direct-to-Kirana model, and it may soon completely replace the traditional system that HUL and many similar FMCG companies have relied on for multiple decades at a stretch. Now, in order to understand why this change matters for someone like you or me, let's first take a look at how an FMCG supply chain broadly works. See, once a company like HUL, which by the way makes everyday products like soaps, shampoos, detergents, etc., manufactures their products, they need to find their way to small Kirana and retail stores. Now, for your context, there are around 12 million Kirana stores across our country, and HUL serves around 9 million of them. Now, traditionally, HUL has not dealt with these stores directly. Instead, they have actually relied on a network of intermediaries who are also called distributors. Now, these distributors play a very important role. They buy products from HUL, they store them, and then deliver it to retail stores. Now, these distributors are also responsible for collecting payments and sharing promotional offers with shopkeepers. And all of this is a system that has worked reasonably well for many years, despite it being complex as well as costly. But the thing is, things are changing quite fast now. India's retail landscape is evolving rapidly, and the way you and I shop is no longer the same. Over the past decade or two, online commerce has absolutely exploded. Today, e-commerce accounts for about 17% of India's FMCG sales. And within that, a massively growing slice of around 30 to 35% comes from quick commerce, which by the way did not even exist 3 to 4 years ago. Platforms like Swiggy, Instamart, Blinkit, etc. are starting to deliver groceries and essentials to your doorstep in just minutes. And that is making the old ways of shopping feel very slow and even outdated in some cases. Now, even though that number that I spoke about is just 17%, the thing is the rise of online shopping has started to disrupt traditional FMCG supply chains very, very meaningfully. Now, for a company like HUL, these digital platforms have practically started doing many of the things that distributors used to handle traditionally. Online platforms today are able to store products, deliver them to customers, and even manage discounts and promotions. And because they operate through centralized warehouses and delivery networks, they are far easier to deal with than the millions of scattered Kirana stores across our country. And at the same time as that, Kirana stores themselves have become a lot more technologically friendly. Many of them now use digital tools like point of sale or POS systems and ordering apps in order to run their businesses a lot more efficiently. And this allows them to bypass distributors and deal directly with manufacturers like HUL. So, in order to keep up with all of these changes, HUL has decided to slowly take control over its supply chain in a way that it has never done before. Now, instead of relying on distributors to manage its logistics, HUL will slowly start doing it themselves. They will handle everything: stocking, picking orders, transporting goods, and ensuring that products reach retail stores directly. And to make all of this possible, they are also expanding their centralized warehouses and are building delivery networks which are absolutely tailored for this new model. And of course, a company of the scale and size of HUL will not jump into this blindly, right? They have been developing digital tools like an app called Shikhar in order to make this transition very smooth. For your context, this app is already being used by over 1.3 million retailers today. Now, this allows shopkeepers to place orders directly with HUL, and it also gives HUL very valuable data on demand patterns, inventory levels, and even store-specific preferences. And obviously, this kind of insight would have been much harder to achieve through a system which is over-dependent on distributors. By the way, there's also financial incentive that is driving this shift. Distributors typically earn a margin of 3 to 10% on the products that they handle. Now, for a company like HUL, which by the way has an annual turnover of about 60,000 crore rupees, this adds up to a massive amount. And by cutting out or reducing the role of distributors, the company can save costs quite a bit and they can redirect those savings elsewhere. It could be to lower prices for consumers or to improve their profit margins for that matter. But there's also a small financial challenge that HUL will have to deal with over here. See, typically distributors get around a 15 to 16 day credit-free period from companies like HUL. This means a company like HUL would give distributors products and only take the money 15 to 16 days later from them. Distributors thereafter give retailers a credit-free period of about 30 to 45 days usually. Now, this difference between the 30 to 45 days minus 15 odd days is what distributors usually offer as a service to retailers. So now if HUL decides to remove these distributors from the equation altogether, they will have to facilitate this credit period themselves. And that particular thing could add to their costs a fair bit, at least in the short run. And also speaking of costs, the FMCG sector as a whole lately has been under some pressure due to rising food inflation in our country. The prices of essential raw materials like wheat, sugar, milk, etc. have all gone up, and that has squeezed profit margins for them. So by streamlining supply chains, HUL can somewhat offset these costs and avoid passing them on to consumers. And of course, let me give you a quick disclaimer over here. A lot of this is based on speculation and not on hard facts. A lot of it will depend on how things play out in the future. But of course, not everyone is looking at this HUL model in a positive light. Distributors, and very well understandably so, are not quite happy with being sidelined. The All India Consumer Products Distributor Federation, or AICPDF, has raised some concerns, and they are calling the direct-to-Kirana model misleading while ignoring ground realities. They have also warned of nationwide movements if distributors are harmed by this shift. So with all of that said and done, in the end, the question really is, what does this really mean for people like you and me? See, on one hand, HUL's move reflects a company that is adapting to a rapidly changing market and leveraging technology in order to stay competitive. But on the other hand, it also emphasizes the kind of tensions that can arise when innovation starts to disrupt traditional systems. But for now, all eyes will be on how this transition exactly takes shape and whether it truly delivers the benefits HUL is hoping for. With that, let's move on to the final section of the day and talk about the quick news tidbits. First, on New Year's Eve, quick commerce and food delivery apps hit record numbers. Blinkit topped its entire volume from last year's celebrations by 5 p.m. itself, with one customer in Kolkata placing an order worth 65,000 rupees. Zepto's orders also jumped by about 200% compared to the previous year, and they received 3,345 requests for ice cubes every single hour. Swiggy's Instamart also doubled its sales and interestingly logged an order of about 70,000 rupees from Goa, while Magic Pin processed as many as 1,500 orders every single minute, with the biggest one reaching around 30,000 rupees. Bangalore, Chennai and Mumbai stood out for their high demand, showing how people rely on instant deliveries during these kind of festivities. Second, Tangent Go cancelled its 2,100 crore rupee plan to install 8.2 million smart meters, rejecting Adani Energy's solution's winning bid for being too expensive. This also happens as the Adani Group faces allegations of irregularities. A new round of bidding here could mean longer delays for reducing power losses and improving billing, and it signals more strict oversight on government contracts. Third, India's petroleum exports dropped sharply. In November 2024, they fell to 3.72 billion US dollars from 7.39 billion US dollars just 1 year earlier. From April to November, exports shrank by almost 19% because of weak global demand, issues linked to the Red Sea crisis, a drop in Russian crude imports, and rising domestic use. The Suez Canal blockade forced ships to take longer routes, which pushed up costs as well. Also, new refineries like in Nigeria increased competition, which shows how easily India's energy trade can be affected by global shifts. That's all the news and stories I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and maybe learned something new from it. As usual, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below and we would love to have a conversation with you. This is your host Anurag Bansal signing off. I will see you in the next episode. Take care and goodbye. Disclaimer: this content is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks, brands, or products mentioned are recommendations or endorsements.